Welcome to Joe's Astrology, and I'm talking about marriage in this video and how to find out what potential partners you might have, how many partners, what your marriage would be like, what some of the challenges are. We can look at all this in astrology, specifically looking at your natal chart, looking at your partner's natal chart, looking at the history, some history if we have it of your life. Contact me if you'd like to do that through an astrology reading. That's the best way to do this. But in this video, I'm just going to take you through some of the things that I've learned and seen that work well in finding out this information. So let's take a look at my chart as an example. I like to use my chart just because I think it helps me understand myself as I do this, and I think I have a good chart for examples, and I know myself better than anybody else, so that's the best way to really show how this works and the things that I've discovered in my life that have helped me and continue to help me. So let's take a look at it. This is my chart here. And I'll go through the signs. I am going to go through the signs. So if you are interested in your sign, we'll take a look generally what that could mean. So we're going to look at the 7th house cusp. And we're going to look at the sign on the 7th house cusp. Are there any planets in the 7th house? So we can see here the sign on the 7th house cusp is Cancer. There's no planets in the 7th house. We could say whole sign if we're looking at the chart through the whole sign house system. There would be the North Node in the 7th house, the North Node of the Moon specifically. And just a little side note, if you do look at the nodes of the other planets in this chart, there are a lot of North Nodes. I believe the North Node of Jupiter is here in the 7th, and something else as well. So just a little side note there. There are other nodes to the other planets. So we have the 7th house cusp, the sign, planets there, any aspects to planets that are there in that sign, the attributes of that planet. We're going to look at the ruler of the 7th house cusp, the ruler of the ascendant. We see that would be Saturn and the Moon. So we would come down here, we would look at Saturn, up here, Saturn in Scorpio. There are 3 degrees. We can look at the condition there, that's Saturn. The Moon here in Aquarius, and aspects to these planets, aspects between these planets, things like that, which we'll all get into. So let's start there. We're going to look at the condition. What's the condition, or what's the qualities of Cancer on the 7th house cusp? And it's not just one thing. We can start with some general things about Cancer. Cancer is a nurturer. So this person could be looking for a nurturer. This person could be looking for an emotional relationship. Think of, water, a deeper relationship, a relationship that is not static. It's on the move. It has that, think of a restless signs, Cancer. Some of the other restless signs, the cardinal signs, the mutable signs. So relationships that aren't necessarily static, they have changes in them, they have these kinds of dynamics. Could be looking for it could be looking for someone to start a family with. This could be a very loyal person because they do value, really it comes down to the emotions. They have strong emotional life, and those relationships are harder to break. So there's things like that. You'd see there's no planets in the 7th. Now I could say specifically for me, if you've watched my channel, I've said some things about this, talking about relationships in my past. I've had opportunities, did not pan out, that were especially when I was younger in life. Some were up to me, some were not up to me. And we can see there's no planets in the 7th. So let's move on. Well, we could even, if we go to the whole sign house, we see the North Node is there in Cancer. There's no planets near the North Node. And there are planets with Neptune here on the south. And all the planets are on the left side of the chart there. Some other things we can look at, though, at that North Node is that there are good or favorable aspects to the North Node. Not necessarily favorable planets for marriage or what you traditionally think. We see there's a trine to Saturn, so that would be an interesting mitigating factor, something to look for, where you potentially could be in a marriage later in life, or that some positive aspects that it would happen. You think Saturn, as you get older, later in life, it is, as I said, it is a trine. It is in Scorpio. It is conjunct Pluto. Pluto and Scorpio. Pluto, Scorpio, Mars is a sign that has to do with loyalty, commitment, doesn't like change, and all the other things I spoke of that have to do with Cancer and the water signs. So that's something you can look at and say that if you're not married and you see things like this, that there would be some potential for the future. Where was I at? Oh, the North Node, and then again on the other side, there's a trine from Saturn to Mars, and there's a trine from Mars to the North Node. Mars again, and that Mars-Pluto trine all have to do with Scorpio. And we see with Mars at 29 degrees that there could be some indication that, if we saw a grand trine, essentially it is a grand trine, but if we saw a grand trine in water instead of with that 29 degrees Aquarius, that maybe this would have happened earlier in life. And then you could see with that 29 degree Mars that there could be some challenges to overcome personally or externally. So there's just some interesting dynamics there with the ruler, with the aspects to what's in the 7th house. We can look at the ruler of the 1st and the 7th. And we look at the ruler, and we see Saturn. Saturn's the ruler of the 1st. So coming back to this Saturn, we can look at the ruler of the 7th. And Moon is in Aquarius. So now we're looking at something fundamentally different from Cancer. That could alter some of the things we have already spoken of. Now there's some more mitigating factors here. We can look at the Moon's conjunct Venus, though. So we also see the Moon is in Aquarius, ruled by, even though traditionally ruled by Saturn, co-ruler Uranus. If Uranus is really taking effect in the life, we would consider that as more changes when it comes to relationships and marriages than commitments or sudden changes. And we have seen that in this person's life. With that being said, though, from the other side, as I talked about what's the relationship going to look like with Cancer on the 7th house cusp? Well, the ruler here, Moon in Aquarius, it's going to be, there could be a lot of things associated with Aquarius, but just generally speaking, a relationship that is very independent. Both partners have a fairly high degree of independence and not codependence. They have the ability to do things on their own. They have their own life. They have things like that going on. There is a unpredictability about the relationship. Things like that. And then we see that it's conjunct that Mars. Again, I think that could be a positive and a negative. Positive in the sense it's connected to all these other planets I talked about being connected to the North Node. And from a negative, traditionally negative standpoint, well, Mars, even though Mars is associated with Scorpio, it's also associated with separation. So we see that might not be good for commitment and relationships, that there could be some issues in the life that in the relationships, even though that they are if they do go into in a deeper way that can keep that bond going for a long time, there could be short-term separations. But then we have Moon with Venus, and that would mitigate all of that. Having the Moon connected to a planet that's associated with harmony, that's associated with, we could say that there are those separations, that the couple is able to work through them. The couple is able to, or at least this person is able to overcome them through harmonious personality. So we're really looking at this Moon being strongly affected by Venus. That's where it's coming from. Coming from a Venusian place. Moving, here we see a new phase, moving away from the Venus and towards the Mars. So speaking of phases, we can look at that Saturn is making a trine. So these two planets, Saturn and Moon, ruling the 1st and the 7th, are making a trine. And Moon is moving towards a trine. So again, more of that indicator of later in life, not so much earlier in life. And again, as you can look at this chart, it doesn't mean the person's not going to have any relationships. But as far as we're looking at a Saturnian long-term marriage type relationship, 7th house relationship, not 5th house. We're looking at, potentially later in life with this phase. So those are some of the things that I talked about in this video. Looking at my chart. Now let's go through the houses, the different signs on the 7th house cusp, and what that can mean for those signs.